did not file any suit in Federal High Court Owerri against INEC or Professor Mahmood Yakubu. The suit that has gone viral was filed in my name and without my consent.
Welcome to the actual news, where we cover the stories that actually matter and nobody is safe. My name is Hundeyin, and here are this week's headlines. A lawsuit has been filed at the Owerri High Court seeking to restrain the Independent National Electoral Commission (INEC) from using the bimodal voter accreditation system (BVAS) at next year's general elections. We speak exclusively to Abazie, a legal practitioner in Owerri who claims that her name, signature, and MBA seal were used fraudulently in filing this case without her knowledge or consent. Labour Party candidate Peter Obi has emerged the front-running candidate for the 2023 presidential election. This is according to the results of a recent poll commissioned by the ANAP Foundation. APC Presidential Campaign Council spokesperson Dela Lake has claimed that APC presidential candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu made his wealth from trading of foreign stocks. More on this in a moment. Earlier this week, the Coalition of United Political Parties, CUPP, raised the alarm publicly concerning an alleged plot to rig the 2023 general elections. Central to this plot, according to the CUPP, was the existence of a lawsuit secretly filed at the Owerri High Court seeking to restrain INEC from using the BVAS system and electronic vote transmission in next year's election. Shortly after the CPP raised the public alarm concerning this plot, it emerged that there was in fact such a lawsuit, which was filed on the 24th of August at the Owerri High Court in Imo State. The plaintiff was one Nwankwerre Moral Chinwe, and the purpose of the lawsuit, as stated in the case files, which you can see on your screen right now, was to have the court declare the use of BVAS and electronic vote transmission by INEC as illegal and unconstitutional ahead of the 2023 general elections. According to the case submission, the purported reason for electronic transmission of results to be banned is that in the event of network failure, voters will not be able to exercise their franchise. Now, before we dig into this story, it's good to first give a little bit of a primer into what exactly BVAS is. Now, BVAS stands for Bimodal Voter Accreditation System, and what you can think of it essentially as a technology system that combines the three stages of voting into one, makes it simpler, and makes it easier to manage. So the three stages of voting are the voter enrollment/registration stage, the voter accreditation stage on election day, and the vote results viewing stage. Now, what the BVAS system does is that it combines all three stages into one using a biometric data capturing and recognition system, which makes it such that even if one person has 50 PVCs, unlike before where you had a card reader and that the PVCs were validated by the card reader and that was what enabled you to vote, which in theory made it possible for people to vote multiple times, assuming they had multiple PVCs. This time around, what validates a vote is a person's biometric details. As you and I know, biometric details cannot be duplicated, right? So things like your iris, your fingerprint, those sorts of things, they can't be duplicated. So essentially what it does is that it creates the opportunity for there to be one person, one vote. So that sort of stuffing, the metaphorical stuffing of the ballot box, which has been a feature of Nigerian elections for decades, on paper will be severely curtailed by the use of BVAS, because it essentially collapses those three stages of voting into one easily manageable system, right? And then it uses biometrics to accredit voters on election day, and then election results can be viewed after voting is done at the polling unit, and then using electronic transmission of results. These results are then transmitted on the same day. So essentially, it makes the voting process very transparent and it makes elections more credible. Now, obviously, it's not hard to see why that will be so important to the voting process in Nigeria, or to anyone with an interest in the voting process in Nigeria, because what that would do, essentially, if applied properly, is that it would make the 2023 election possibly the most credible election in, quite possibly the history of democracy in Nigeria. And obviously, if anyone had an interest in making the elections not transparent and not credible, then obviously use of BVAS and electronic vote transmission would be a problem for that person. Which brings us back to this lawsuit. Now, following the emergence of this lawsuit, it emerged that the lawyer whose name, signature, and MBA seal appears on these case files actually did not file this lawsuit and did not give her permission for any of her details to be used, and in fact had no knowledge of this lawsuit. OJ Abazie of Dimobuji Chambers in Owerri is the lawyer in question. Now, when she found out that her details had been used to file this case on behalf of, God knows who, she quickly raised the alarm. She put out a disclaimer, which you can see on your screen right now, where she specified that she knows nothing about this case. She did not in any way consent for her details to be used in this way. And in fact, the way that her MBA seal came to be used was essentially through fraud. Someone who had access to her MBA seal essentially used this seal without her knowledge and permission to file this case. And that, in actual fact, she did not even agree with the material submission in this case. So not only was this filing done in her name without her permission, it was actually done against what she would actually have liked to have done. We speak exclusively to her on the show now.
My name is OJ Abazie Esquire. I'm a junior lawyer in the law office of CK Mbenkonye and Co., Shekinah Chambers of number 9 Ebu Road, Owerri, Imo State. I want to use this opportunity to further disclaim that I did not file any suit in Federal High Court Owerri against INEC or Professor Mahmood Yakubu. The suit that has gone viral was filed in my name and without my consent by Blessing B. Mike Iwajunwa Esquire. She called me from her own office at number 9 Ebu Road, Owerri, while I was in Lagos during the MBA National Conference, requesting that I give her 2 of my seals. I asked her what she needed to do with my seal. Being a senior lawyer, at least she can afford to pay for any quantity that she wants. And she said she bought a landed property in her name, that she doesn't want to be the donee and also the maker of the power of attorney. I said, okay, no problem. Give any of her secretaries phone. She gave one of her secretaries Chinyere phone, and I instructed Chinyere where she will collect my seal from and give this my learned senior, which Chinyere did. My learned senior left and promised that we will see when I come back from the conference. I came back from the conference and called her severally for us to meet, probably for me to go through the document that she has prepared and know if it's worth signing by me or not. But due to our busy schedules, we didn't meet. So I traveled to my village today in preparation of my mom's burial, which is a week today, only for me to be getting numerous calls upon calls concerning this suit that she filed in my name without my consent. And the most painful part of it is that she also forged my signature. This is so disheartening. I'm being distracted now from the normal activities that brought me home. I don't know why a senior lawyer of her kind that I respect so much, how could she descend this low to do things at my own detriment? I feel very, very bad. I feel really pained now. She has called to apologize. But then, the deed has been done.
Apart from the fact that fraud has obviously taken place here, someone's details, professional and personal details, have been used to file a lawsuit that they know nothing about and they did not consent to be involved in, and that they in fact materially disagree with. Why this story is so important is that it mirrors something that has been done before at another very crucial point in Nigeria's history, which mirrors the point we're at. Now, almost exactly 30 years ago, ahead of 1993 general election, during the Ibrahim Babangida military regime, there was a group which styled itself as the Association for a Better Nigeria. It was fronted by Chief Arthur Nzeribe, the late Arthur Nzeribe. Now, this group was widely thought to be sponsored by the military government. The sort of vast amount of funding it had access to, the very shadowy nature of this group, the fact that it was very difficult to even pinpoint who were members of this group, and the amount of scorn and contempt it was treated with in the media and the civil society space. That gave some kind of clue as to what the purpose of this group was. Now, what this group did during that election was that it filed a couple of lawsuits. First of all, ahead of the election, it filed a lawsuit seeking to have the very election scrapped, that the election shouldn't be held. That essentially the military administration should be given 4 more years to quote-unquote stabilize Nigeria. So the court threw out the case, and that should have been the end of that. However, shortly after the election, this group came back and filed another lawsuit, this time challenging the very validity of the election, stating that the politicians who took part in the election were corrupt, therefore the election should be declared null and void. Ordinarily, this would have been recognized as just like a spurious lawsuit, a spurious court case that shouldn't have been given the time of day. But as it so happens, when a government is looking for a pretext to do things that it already has in mind, these are the sort of very convenient patsies that it uses to push through whatever agenda it's looking to push through. And that's exactly what the Ibrahim Babangida administration did when the June 12, 1993 presidential election was annulled. It took advantage of this very case, which was filed by the Association for Better Nigeria, and claimed that as a result of this case, it was annulling the election. Obviously, the real reason for the election's annulment was more political than anything that was contained in these case files. This case was just like a very convenient patsy, right? And even Chief Arthur Nzeribe later on all but admitted this. But the fact is that it was used as a special purpose vehicle to achieve that aim at that point in time, and that was that. And what happened next is history. So essentially, some would argue that what is happening now with this sort of clandestine lawsuits being filed very secretly, very quietly in Owerri, in a place where you wouldn't, think to, even look for such a lawsuit, and then being filed, under the name of someone who doesn't even know that their name, their signature, their MBA seal was used to file a lawsuit on a, in a case that has such potentially huge national significance. Is this the 2023 manifestation of the Association for a Better Nigeria lawsuit that was filed in 1993? Is someone who has an interest in the 2023 election not being free, fair, and credible trying to use this case to essentially sort of serve as a convenient patsy for having electronic vote transmission and BVAS use cancelled ahead of this election? Because bear in mind that, first of all, if electronic vote transmission is cancelled, what that means is that rigging has been enabled once again. Because even if people vote, even if people stay and protect their votes, between when the INEC staff leave the polling booth at the polling unit and return to the state INEC office or wherever, within that period, that's when magic happens in Nigerian elections. That's when tens turn into hundreds, and hundreds turn into thousands, and thousands turn into millions. That's when zeros are added and subtracted. That's when all sorts of mathematical chicanery starts to take place, all sorts of shenanigans, right? What electronic vote transmission does is that it removes the opportunity for all of that. So in your presence, when you finish voting and you're there, the votes are tallied in your presence and they're transmitted in your presence. And as they're transmitted, they are received almost instantaneously at INEC HQ, and everything is tabulated almost instantaneously. So then it makes it a lot more difficult to cheat and hide and adjust figures and rig and make elections non-credible. So why is someone filing a lawsuit, first of all, challenging electronic vote transmission and using a premise as weak as, well, some people might not have network coverage. So because of, a small minority of people who might not have network coverage, therefore, the entirety of Nigeria shouldn't have the benefit of electronic vote transmission. It's very easy to tell when, a sort of like very spurious, sort of silly argument is being put forward. And even more tellingly, fraud has been used to file this lawsuit because the lawyer, as you heard, has no knowledge that her name, her signature, her MBA seal, which by the way is a legal document in itself, has been used to file a lawsuit. I'm not exactly sure on what the specifics of law are. I'm not a lawyer, but it's quite clear that if a suit has been filed fraudulently using the details of a lawyer who has no knowledge of the fact that details are being used, that suit should be struck out. But the question here is, who is actually behind this suit, this lawsuit, and what exactly is their goal? These are the questions that need to be asked. We come back after the break.
This is an apple. Just dearly distinguished, I put it to you that this, in fact, is a picture of a common garden snake. Just for illustrative purposes, of course.
No, it's a guava. I went to Goucher College. I have 30 years of experience. I'm a doctor and a journalist. I hosted the Grammys.
Disparate opinions.
Labour Party candidate Peter Obi is now the front-running candidate ahead of the 2023 presidential election. This is according to the results of a recent poll commissioned by ANOP Foundation and was carried out by NOI Polls, which put his current total vote share at 21%, which is 8 percentage points ahead of his closest challengers, Atiku Abubakar and Bola Tinubu, both at 13% each. The real story here, however, is not that Peter Obi is leading the two establishment candidates as the outsider, as the rank outsider, which some said he was, right? Because the Labour Party essentially was viewed as a third force party behind the APC and PDP, which were viewed as the establishment parties. That in itself is quite a significant story, but that's not what the story here is for me. In this commentary, I'm going to be focusing on the fact that the total percentage of undecided voters, which is 32% according to this poll, is still significantly more than any of the leading candidates, which means that as it stands, there is still no indication as to who exactly it is that Nigerians are looking to choose to be their president next year. We're 5 months to possibly the most important election in 2 or 3 generations, and the candidates could not be more strikingly different. And yet somehow the largest group of voters, according to this poll in Nigeria, is a group of undecided voters. And the question I have to ask is, what on earth does a Nigerian voter in 2022 have to be undecided about? What exactly is it that is going to help an undecided voter make up their mind, which hasn't already happened over the past 7 years? What is it that needs to happen? And bear in mind that regardless of whatever political positions I have expressed and I continue to express very, proudly in my off time, it should be pointed out that this is not a commentary that is speaking in favor of any specific political candidate, but this is a commentary that specifically targets the absurdity of the existence of an undecided voter 5 months to this of all elections. Right? Let's say your candidate, for example, for the sake of argument, were to be Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Right? It's clear why you would want this person to be your president if that was a candidate that you had chosen. Right? And it would be, maybe you believe that this person had some kind of blueprint in Lagos, rightly or wrongly. You believe that he had some kind of blueprint. He leads some kind of progressive establishment in Lagos, and maybe you want him to replicate that on the national level. Or it could simply be that you believe that this is a tribal thing, it's an ethnic thing, and you are voting in favor of, Omowa, right? Or it could be that you believe that there's something in it for you, right? Again, like, if it's any of those three things, it's not hard to see what the appeal is. If the choice were to be Peter Obi, again, it's also not hard to see what the appeal is. You feel as if this is someone who can take the country in a different direction to what we have witnessed over the past 7 years. You probably feel as if the country desperately needs some sort of competent administration at the helm, and that more of the same will basically render the country even more, existentially endangered than it already is. You feel as if maybe Peter Obi is somebody who is going to enact some kind of a rescue mission. Again, it's not hard to see what the appeal is in either of those cases. But the point is that both candidates offer vastly different value propositions. Now, when we speak about the phenomenon of undecided voters, typically this is in the context of more advanced, more developed economies and societies, right? So in the US, for example, let's say the 2012 US election, which is like the perfect example of where you would expect to find an undecided voter. So you had Barack Obama on one hand, you had Mitt Romney on the other hand. Both of them have a track record of sort of, decent, reasonably boring competence, which is kind of what you want in a leader, right? Neither of them had any huge whiff of scandal around them particularly. It was, by American terms, by American standards, it was a fairly placid election cycle. Barack Obama ended up winning the election, but if Mitt Romney had won it, the world wouldn't have ended either. It was, American voters didn't feel as if this was an election that was do or die, or it was an election that particularly decided anything. Right? That's where you would expect to see voter apathy or voter indecision, because really it's a choice between 6 and 7 or 6 and 6. Right? The difference between both candidates in that sort of election is not that great. So, voter indecision is really, it can be a thing. Now, compare and contrast that to the 2016 or the 2020 US election and see how, I'm sure you can go check the numbers and see what the turnout was in 2020 versus 2012. And that's because the value proposition offered by both candidates in 2020 was so vastly different, and the election was so polarized, and there wasn't really any space, logically, rationally, for there to be much indecision. There wasn't really anything to be undecided about. It was very clear. You were either for Trump and all that he represented, or you were for the other guy and all that he represented. It was very clear. There wasn't any sort of gray area in there. And I believe that that's what the 2023 election is in Nigeria. Both, technically there are 3 front-running candidates, actually, not 2, but I choose to categorize Peter Obi on the one hand and the other 2 on the other hand, just for reasons of sort of categorizing the election into establishment versus challenger. So we can categorize both the APC and the PDP as establishment, and we can categorize the Labour Party broadly as the challenger. The value proposition put out by the challenger and by the establishment could not be more different. It's oil and water, it's chalk and cheese, it's oranges and wardrobes. They have nothing in common. So, what on earth is a Nigerian voter who has experienced 7 years of the incumbent administration undecided about? 7 years is enough time for you to have made up your mind whether you want more of the same or you want to change, because essentially any election is essentially a referendum on the performance of the incumbents. That's what an election is, really. 2015 was a referendum on the performance of Goodluck Jonathan. Right? 2023 is a referendum on the performance of the APC. So if over the past 7 years, you have seen enough to convince you that the APC is what is the political formation that has what it takes to give you your self-actualization and to give you the Nigeria that you want, I think you would know that for a fact by now. And if conversely, the past 7 years has convinced you that you definitely need a change in a different direction, and the APC absolutely does not represent what you want, I think there has also been enough time to have made that judgment by now. I do not really understand how 5 months to the election, 32%, fully a third of Nigeria's electorate, according to this poll, have not decided. I don't understand it. Please make it make sense. We'll be back after the break. APC Presidential Campaign Council spokesperson Dele Alake has claimed that APC presidential candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu's wealth came from trading foreign stocks. Speaking during an appearance on Channels TV recently, Mr. Alake claimed that Tinubu has been a long-time trader of blue chip stocks and bonds, and that Nigerians who question his source of wealth are merely expressing their hatred of the man. Now, as I like to say on this show, argue with the numbers and facts, don't argue with me. And that's exactly what I've tried to do in putting this segment together. Now, as Mr. Alake may or may not have been aware, the activity of stock trading, especially in foreign spaces, the foreign blue chip stocks as he termed it, is a very well recorded, well documented, and readily accessible activity. In other words, if Bola Ahmed Tinubu actually did any such thing, these records would not be difficult to find. So I consulted the US SEC's EDGAR database. EDGAR stands for Electronic Data Gathering, Analysis and Retrieval System. The EDGAR database is split in two. So there's the part of the database that goes back to 2001, which allows certain types of searches, and then there's the older part which goes all the way back to 1994, where you can search for basically anyone that has done anything that is under the SEC's jurisdiction, which includes stock trading and includes buying and selling, trading of equity in both public and privately traded entities in the US. So if indeed Bola Ahmed Tinubu did actually carry out any significant trading activities in foreign blue chip stocks and bonds, this is where you find it, right? Again, this is not very difficult information to find. So I went looking for it, and this is what I found. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Zero. Zilch. No records. Nothing. What you do find, however, when you go digging into Tinubu is wealth. Lots of it. Unexplained wealth. Loads and loads of real estate. Real estate in his wife's name, real estate in his daughter's name, real estate in his other daughter's name, and one single business entity whose other two board members apart from him are two people who are convicted drug dealers. That's obviously Moise Akonde and Agbeli. So this obviously raises more questions than answers. Like, if Dele Alake was lying about something that is so readily available to be fact-checked, right? Or perhaps he was not aware that this thing was so readily available to be fact-checked and could be so easily debunked. Now, not only does the question remain that how exactly did Tinubu make his money? Where exactly did his wealth come from? And to be honest, I don't think we don't know where his wealth came from. I think we know that. I don't think that is something that is still a question at this point in time. There is enough documentation out there to have a very, very good idea of where his wealth came from. But putting that aside for a moment, the issue here is that a frontline presidential candidate for an election 5 months away, a presidential candidate running on the platform of the current ruling party, a presidential candidate who has previously come out and said,
presidential
candidate who has this visible out of whack sense of personal entitlement and ego, right, does not believe that he owes it to you or to me or to the electorate or to the citizens that he hopes to be president of in a few months' time to explain to them how he came to be who and what he is. where his wealth came from, where his money came from. He does not believe that he owes it to us to give us that explanation. I don't need to explain why that is a problem, because I think we've had 7 years of lived experience to tell us what happens when you have a president who doesn't feel like he owes you any explanation, doesn't owe you any information, doesn't owe you anything. Like, just his existence should be enough for you. President who believes that he's a gift to you, and that your job is just basically to worship him. Right? We've had 7 years of lived experience. I don't think we need another 8 years to figure out that this doesn't work, or that this can't work for a Nigeria that wants to grow. Right? So the challenge now is, being that we're in this situation now where we have 3 front-running presidential candidates ahead of next year, at least one of them appears to be something of a ghost, a historical ghost. We don't know where he came from. We don't know who his actual family is. We don't know what his real name is. We don't know what his actual date of birth is. The first 30 or 40 years of his life are totally shrouded in mystery. We don't know how many children he has, what all their names are. We don't know, well, we know where his money came from, but some would like to, insist that it's a question instead of an answer. We don't know where his money came from, supposedly. And we don't know how, in the space of 20 plus years since he came into frontline politics as a governor, he has amassed so much wealth without having a single business entity that you can point to, or a source of wealth, visible source of wealth that you can point to. And amidst all of this, this person just believes that, well, just for the fact of existing, he's owed the presidency. This person believes that it's okay for the president of a country of close to 200 million people to just have unexplained wealth, to just be basically like Kim Kardashian, who is famous because she's famous, right? And you have a presidential candidate who is rich because he's rich. And that's it. There's no source of wealth. There's no attempt at explanation for where this money came from. How come it is that some of his closest associates are known convicted drug dealers who have actually done time in jail? How it is that drug money has been found in his accounts and has been forfeited to the United States government? How it is that business entities linked to him have been mentioned in the Pandora Papers, and that there are existing lawsuits that claim that this person is highly involved in money laundering, both locally and internationally. How it is that this person has all sorts of whiffs of scandal around him. How it is that the person who helped Abazie launder $4 billion of Nigerian oil revenues is his bestie nowadays. Right? There are so many questions and no answers. And most importantly of all, he and the political establishment around him don't seem to think that we deserve answers. And that, for me, is the takeaway from all of this. It's not just that Dele Alake is lying, which he obviously was. It's not just that there are so many questions that we want to ask, or that we've been asking, that we have no answers to. But that he and his people do not believe that we are owed these answers. And that, according, in the words of Dele Alake, if you ask these questions, then it means that you are showing hatred for him. Somebody who wants to be president. And that was the actual news. Join me next week as we tackle more stories that actually matter, and nobody will be safe. My name is Hundeyin. Thanks for watching.